All right, man, peace. So as many of you brothers out there who follow professional basketball know, the NBA has done a very diligent job of trying to craft or style itself as the most quote-unquote woke professional sports league in America. And that means that they like to stay on the cutting edge of what they think black people should be thinking, not only about them, but also themselves as so-called black people, as well as the world. The NBA is extremely important when it comes to globalism, and that goes all the way back to David Stern, who was a member of the Council of Foreign Relations. But just getting back to the NBA, they've decided that they're going to deal with the quote-unquote George Floyd murder, as well as the Black Lesbians Matter movement protests that occurred in the aftermath, by aligning themselves with the quote-unquote Black Lives Matter, aka the Black Lesbians Matter, aka the Black Lesbian Marxist movement, by having that slogan on the side of their buses to show you what? They are in lockstep with Marxism, with quote-unquote communism, with the Democratic Party. And that's truly all this is about. They're using the players in the NBA as props and as pawns. And it seems as though a couple of them have picked up on it. LeBron James, for one, is deeply embedded enough in the Democratic Party that his attitude is, I'm already a pawn for the Democrats and the Caucasian liberals. I don't have to lower myself to a slogan like these dim-witted niggas in the NBA are. I already know who my master is. They don't. That's the main difference between LeBron James and these other NBA players. He knows that he serves and does the bidding of the Caucasian liberal elite. Many of them don't. Many of them have styled themselves as quote-unquote revolutionaries. Well, there's another NBA player who's going to pull a stunt that I like. I just do not like the sentiment. I like the stunt. I just don't like the sentiment. That being Mr. Jimmy Butler, the star shooting guard / small forward of the Miami Heat, who's decided that he's not going to choose any of these pseudo-revolutionary slogans that the NBA has already pre-picked for its players to wear. Not only is he not going to wear a slogan, he's also not going to wear his name. Because the sentiment behind it, according to him, is that he believes that if he were not a professional basketball player, he would be a nobody. Now, of course, certain people, particularly quote-unquote woke brothers, will say, well, brother, what he's really saying is that if he was not in the NBA, he'd be viewed as a nobody. But that, to me, is the problem. Because you are how you view yourself. You're not how you're viewed by others. You are what you view yourself as. So anyway, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
Jimmy Butler has decided he will not have his name or any social justice message on the back of his jersey when the season restarts. Butler wants his jersey to remain blank, as his own statement that it would represent who he would be if he was not a basketball player.
That's a major problem for me. I'm going to say it again. I like the stunt. I just don't like the sentiment. Had he decided that he was not going to wear his last name or the NBA quote-unquote woke slogan on the back of his jersey and said, the reason why I'm not going to have anything on the back of my jersey is because I don't want to be bothered with this nonsense. I'm out here to get this money. I'm going to do with my money whatever I feel like doing to assist my people and myself. That's it. Don't ask me what I think about the Black Lives Matter movement, because that's really just trickeration, as Mary J. Blige would say. They want to know whether or not you're a black man who they want to have in their NBA, a so-called black man. That's going to be the only reason why they ask these players about what they think about the quote-unquote protests and the movements associated with the Black Lesbians Matter movement. If you're someone who thinks outside of the box or outside of the matrix, they're going to want you out of the NBA. Because once again, even though they claim, when I say they, I'm talking about these pseudo-revolutionary forces like Antifa and Black Lives Matter, they claim that they're against fascism, but they're wholly for fascism. They're the epitome of fascism, at least neo-fascism in the United States. They're just as fascist as the quote-unquote Ku Klux Klan, the skinheads, etc. They're just on the other end of the spectrum. So that's why I don't like the sentiment. I like the stunt, but I don't like the sentiment. I don't like a so-called black man saying that he would be nobody unless he was in the NBA or the NFL, or unless he was in, a certain corporation having a certain job. You're not what your job is. You are what the Most High created you to be, which is the fleshly manifestation of the angels in this three-dimensional world. That's what you're supposed to be. That's what you're supposed to aspire to be. That's what's called a ruling class mentality. And the vast majority of brothers do not have that. That's why people are striving for quote-unquote equality as opposed to the rulership.
And how do you feel about this? Are you good with it?
I like it. It's a very creative idea, Skip. Something that I really...
You would like it, with your silly liberal woke ass.
Thought of, but I like it. Skip, we see and we hear players when they retire from professional sports. When the guy says, I'm walking away from the game of football, he says, I'm hanging up the cleats. I'm putting away the pads. Or you hear a guy says basketball, the shorts and the gym shoes, Skip, I'm done. I'm hanging them up. Baseball, I'm putting the glove in the closet and the spikes are going away. But you never hear a black athlete says, I'm hanging up that black skin.
What the hell is this dude talking about? You've never heard a black athlete say, I'm hanging up that black skin. What are you talking about, dude? Shannon Sharpe, he's one of many liberal Negroes that we see in the mainstream liberal sports media or just mainstream media, period, that clearly is psychologically disturbed. He needs to go to a psychiatrist because he's not someone who believes in the scriptures. People like him and Jamel Hill and Van Lathan, these characters who get on television and try to act as if they're representatives of the quote-unquote black community. All they are cartoon characters. They're so two-dimensional, and they desperately want to be considered as deep or people with a firm grasp of the problems that society has, and supposedly they know how to solve them. Basically, all they're doing is getting paid to talk race at the very low level that they talk it. Who the fuck would talk anything about being able to hang up their skin after they retire? Like, who thinks like that? Who cares? What are you talking about?
Well, Skip, he can't take that off. He can't retire from that. He can't. He'll lose.
Right, but it sounds like you want to. The more these dudes talk about skin color equaling race, the more you know how embarrassed they are inwardly to be a so-called black man because of the ignorance that they have about their own history. That's why it's so important to embrace the cultural aspect. And furthermore, that further proves how mentally, psychologically, spiritually disturbed people like Shannon Sharpe are. Him, Jamel Hill, Van Lathan, etc. Because as soon as you'll have a notable figure in this society who is also a part of the entertainment sphere, like a Nick Cannon or Deshaun Jackson, talk about actual culture, those will normally be the first people that will tell them, oh no, we can't fight hate with hate. As opposed to them saying the truth is going to do what it does, that being separate people. That's why I always tell you brothers that in the liberal hierarchy, the Caucasian Jew is at the pinnacle of that. And that's why the Caucasian Jew spends so much time telling so-called black people what to think, how to think, and really how to troll quote-unquote white trash. The Caucasian liberal Jew wants you to focus on regular so-called Caucasian people so that they can continue to rape our community dry. They're the ones who control the hip-hop industry, the sports world, etc. And they get so embarrassed when these truths are brought out. Why are you so embarrassed about it unless you do not want people to figure out what's really going on? Almost every chancellor of the NAACP has been Jewish. And this is an organization that supposedly represents so-called black people. From its inception in the 1920s, I believe it was, the NAACP has always been led by a Jewish man. So that's why we have to get back in touch with real race, which is culture, ethnicity, lineage, and not about skin color. This fool sat here and said you can't take your skin off when you retire. Nobody wants to, dude. What are you talking about, man?
That. And if somebody gets mad at LeBron James, makes $100 million a year in endorsement and stuff, what do they call him, Skip?
Who gives a fuck? Who cares if some white trash calls LeBron James a nigga, a rich nigga, a bitch nigga? If you're LeBron James and you love yourself and you're with your wife and your kids, why do you worry about what someone is saying about LeBron James if they get upset with him? What did someone call John Elway when they got upset with him? I'm sure they call him a name also. They couldn't call him a nigga, but they would call him something else. People are going to call you things over the course of your life. It's a matter of how important you think that person is to your overall life and your future. And the vast majority of people do not fucking matter. The real problem that this show has, Undisputed, and it's a nice debate show, but the real problem that they have is that they communicate in an echo chamber. They never have any guests that can push a lot of the liberal ideologies that they promote. When I say push, I don't mean go along with. I mean test them. They need someone to sit in that third chair who actually is going to confront Shannon Sharpe for his liberal woke bullshit and those phony philosophies that he likes to espouse every day, where no one calls him out because they're scared of being called racist. Now, supposedly, Will Kane has been hired by Fox Sports 1. It will be very interesting to see if they dare have him sit in within this progressive bubble right here. We talk about the bubble with the NBA. This is a bubble right here. All Skip Bayless does is sit back like the Caucasian, guilt-ridden old fool that he is. The quasi-liberal that he is, because he's not a real liberal. Skip Bayless is just someone who is overwhelmed with quote-unquote white guilt. He's used the N-word before in his life. There's no doubt about that. There's no way that you're going to tell me a 69-year-old, 68-year-old white man from Oklahoma has never used the word nigger. I'm just not buying it. But what he is, he's also very opportunistic, and he understands that Shannon Sharpe, if he's allowed to, will talk himself into situations that are good for the TV show. It's good for Undisputed to have these quote-unquote racially conscious conversations because it will bring in a larger black audience, and Skip Bayless understands that pop culture is basically quote-unquote black culture. So if you attract more black viewership, you're also down the line going to attract more youthful Caucasian viewership, because the Caucasian youth follow whatever the black youth does and the black adults do. So that's what this is really all about. He's just using Shannon Sharpe. And Shannon Sharpe, he likes to be used because he wants to diversify his portfolio. He wants to be able to say to himself, if I get laid off of Fox Sports 1, I can go to CNN and talk politics.
Thing they call a black guy that's making $5 an hour. He's still an in.
Yep.
You see what I'm saying, Skip? So you can't outrun that. I don't care how much money you make.
Right, but Shannon Sharpe, why is that the issue? Does it bother you that much that no matter how successful you've been in your career, that there's some five-tooth having white man from West Virginia who could be sitting back watching his TV and calling you a nigger? Does that really bother you that much?
So I like Jimmy Butler saying, you know what? I'm just like the guys I'm fighting for. I'm just like the people I'm fighting for.
No, he's not, and no, you're not. But that's why you do what you do, because Shannon Sharpe is really like a chocolate-covered Caucasian liberal. Caucasian liberals, they want to feel like they're better people than they actually are. So they have to act as if they're quote-unquote down with the downtrodden. Shannon Sharpe has not been downtrodden since he was 18 years old. He lived on campus. He was a football star. He was drafted into the NFL in 1990. And he spent 13, 14 years in the NFL having sex with as many white women as he could find and being entitled. Right after his NFL career, he got hired at CBS, which was a very cushy position. He was on the panel, and he was there for like, 9, 10 years? And now he's with Skip Bayless. So how much of a quote-unquote regular black man life has he really lived? From his birth to maybe 16, 17 years old? This is for him. This is catharsis for him, to make himself feel like he's one with the downtrodden or with the quote-unquote neglected. Brothers, it's 2020. We're no longer in the time period where so-called black men don't have a voice. We have multiple platforms where we can express ourselves. It's just a matter of how cogent is your expression and how powerful or how insightful is your thought process. If you have those things, if you have gifts, people will listen. If you don't, they won't. But Shannon Sharpe loves promoting playing the victim.
They don't know their name. They don't need to know mine. I don't know what Jimmy is, 22. So I'm just 22. That's what I am. And that's what I want to be. I'm a blank slate. You know, Skip, Malcolm X, he went to Malcolm X. He said because it represented the African name that he would never know.
Well, Malcolm X went to that name Malcolm X because X represents the unknown. It represents the variable. That's why the X is the symbol for the quote-unquote great Kemetic entity, Amun-Ra, the unknown God. And that's really talking about the divine goat. Please keep in mind that the Nation of Islam descended from the Moorish Science Temple. The Moorish Science Temple basically is the Babylonian Kemetic mystery school system for the Moors of America. It's basically the same thing. But that's the reason why he took that name, Malcolm X, or was given that name, whatever term you prefer. X represents the unknown. It represents the variable.
unknown entity. So he went by Malcolm X. So for me, Skip, I like it. I like what Jimmy's doing. It's thought provoking because I'm sure someone's going to ask, why you didn't put no name on your back? And then he gets an opportunity to explain why he did it.
Right, but for him to say if he wasn't in the NBA, he'd be a nobody, what are you really trying to say? Are you that worried about the perceptions of others? You could have gone on to become a great plumber, a great architect, a great engineer. Hell, a cross-country truck driver, making $120,000 a year, happy with your life. Just because you would not have been in the NBA would not have made you a nobody. So, let's grasp that you are what you feel like you are on the inside. How you view yourself is what matters. It's not about how other people view you. Shannon Sharpe is concerned with how other people view so-called black people. That's why he's always talking about skin and you can't take off skin and all this nonsense. He's one of these dudes, if he wasn't on TV, he wouldn't know what to do with himself. But he's the same guy talking about Antonio Brown and how Antonio Brown only defines himself as a football player. Remember, Antonio Brown said that. He said, if I'm not AB, I'm nobody. And Shannon Sharpe basically ripped him. But Jimmy Butler's saying the same damn thing in a roundabout way. In a roundabout way, he is. So that's the crux of the statement to me, or that's the crux of the quote-unquote argument. Do you know who you are? Do you know why you're special? It's not about how people feel about you on the outside, because people's perceptions of you are going to change. You're going to come across people who just don't like you for a particular reason, or any reason. But you cannot allow your life path to be affected by that, or your self-image to be affected by that.
He already explained.
Yeah.
It's interesting about Malcolm X. The way I understood it, Nation of Islam instructed all of its followers to drop their given last name.
The slave master.
Yes. And go with X. Right. So his wife was Betty X. She would have been Shannon X, Skip X.
Well, his wife was Betty Shabazz. And Malcolm X took the last name Shabazz as well.
I wouldn't be there, but
for the so-called quote-unquote lost tribe of Shabazz, which has no basis in real history, by the way. But it's very clear that the quote-unquote lost tribe of Shabazz was meant to be congruent with the lost tribes of the nation of Israel.
Actually, for a while, Skip, if I'm not mistaken, he went by Shabazz.
Yes.
Know that, but I just know they were all the followers were instructed immediately to go X, and I always loved it for Malcolm X's sake because it gave him a mystique and an intrigue to his name.
Right.
Yes, because you were a fan of so-called black men from your childhood, Skip Bayless, as many so-called young white children are. And that's the reason why this society at large attacks the so-called black man. They will never attack the so-called black woman. So this notion that the so-called black woman has been under attack is just nonsense. They're not a threat. I saw a stat the other day where they were trying to prove that so-called black women were so much more under attack from the police than the so-called white woman is. And it was laughable to me because I'm just going to be quite honest with you. Every situation that I've ever seen a so-called black woman get harassed or beat down or shot or killed by a cop, it was because she was losing her fucking mind and trying to act as if she was going to treat the cop like how she treats her baby daddy, and they were not going to have that. So, when I compare the statistics of Caucasian female casualties to the cops in comparison to the so-called black female and the casualties that they happen to suffer at the hands of the police, we have to delve deeply into some of these statistics and find out exactly what's what. Either way, just to get back to the point, the man is always going to be the threat. The so-called black man is the threat. And that's why Malcolm X, when he was on TV, he was an extremely eloquent figure. He was very disparate from what they thought so-called black men were supposed to be. Like the Louis Armstrong archetype, just play your horn and make the bug eyes and smile really broad and wide. Basically, all you're missing is a damn watermelon slice in your mouth.
If you're just Malcolm, I think he was Malcolm Little from Omaha, Nebraska.
Yeah.
Okay, but if you're Malcolm X,
right. But Skip,
you got my attention.
Some of the guys they kept the name because Muhammad Ali. He followed the faith, and so he kept. He was Muhammad Ali.
Right, but he didn't keep the name. He was given that name by Elijah Muhammad. Muhammad means worthy of all praises, and Ali means most high. And that's a direct quote from Muhammad Ali, who was given that name by Elijah Muhammad because at the time there were worries within the Nation of Islam that Malcolm X was trying to woo Muhammad Ali over to his new enterprise. So Elijah Muhammad gave him that name, both a first and a last name, to encourage Ali not to leave the Nation of Islam, which was really for Ali's benefit, because had he left, they probably would have killed him, to be honest with you, or seriously thought about it.
So for him, I think because I remember the movie, I'm playing it back, and he said why he changed it to the X. I'm going to have to go back and research that again, but I think that's the reason why he did.
Yes, the X represents the unknown. As they were allegedly told, they would never know their ancestors' true last names. So the X was a placeholder, but the real reason why the X was chosen is because it represents the quote-unquote divine variable. It represents the unknown, that unknown being the great quote-unquote demiurge, as the Greeks would call him, but really the grand creator, the creator god Ptah, or Ta, known to the Greeks as Hephaestus, known to the Romans as Vulcan, the god of fire. That is the god of all of these Luciferian groups, bottom line. So that is the quote-unquote unknown god. That is the reason why the Nation of Islam chose the X, unbeknownst to them. And that's why I mentioned, once again, their organization sprang out of the Moorish Science Temple. And I believe the dude's name is Wallace Fard Muhammad. Wasn't even a so-called black man. The person who founded or was credited as being the teacher of Elijah Muhammad or Elijah Poole.
The point is, with Jimmy, if he put X on his back...
And besides that, as I've stated in previous videos, the last name that most so-called black people have in this society are their actual last names. Now, are there so-called black people who adopted the last name of their quote-unquote slave master? Sure, but it's nowhere near as commonplace as the Caucasians' history books would have you believe. Many of us came here directly from England, Scotland, and Ireland, and Wales with the last names that we currently have. I did a video a very long time ago called Welsh Names Equal Black Names. And when you look down the list of Welsh names, names like Griffin, Griffith, Griffey, Jones, Williams, very, very common last names for so-called black people here, especially in the United States. Names that we tend to have even more than so-called white people tend to have. And there's very little explanation as to why. And it's because we came here with those names already.
My eyes are open, like, okay, what's your statement here? And I'm more interested. Okay, again, I've told you this before, and I'm going to triple down on it.
Okay.
Here is another disappointment for me, strictly from a white perspective.
Right, but if you're speaking strictly from a white perspective, quote-unquote white perspective, that means that you have no perspective at all. Who are you to decide what's disappointing? You're still casting yourself as the standard setter. Like, their sense of superiority is so deeply embedded, and that's to be expected because they are in rulership still, even though their rulership is starting to wane. So they still have that ruling class sense of superiority mentality. Like, nigger, even though I'm trying to empower you, you should still listen to my directions. That's the attitude and the outlook that they have. Like, someone is supposed to care about his perspective on a quote-unquote racial issue. I saw a video with Dame Dash in which he corrected some wiggle white boy named Adam 22. When Adam 22 was trying to drag him into this pseudo-liberal conversation about Kanye West and Kanye West's support of Donald Trump. And Dame Dash had to check him and let him know that he had no place to tell him what so-called black people should be thinking about Kanye West or about Donald Trump. And Dame Dash continued to ask him, why would you say that black people should care about what you think, and you're telling this to another black man? And this wiggle white boy, Adam 22, kept trying to change the topic and change the subject because that's their nature. Liberal Caucasians, they're just as bad as the conservative Caucasians, if not worse, because they try to make the so-called black man believe that they're his friend. That's why the backdrop of the film Get Out was even more powerful because the family was a liberal Caucasian family. The Armitages were liberal Caucasian on the outside.
I believe that a whole lot of white people who love the NBA are going to be on their edge of the seats when these games, we hope, start back again at the end of this month. And the white community needs to be bombarded with constant messages
of white guilt, right? That's what the so-called white community needs to be bombarded with. Somewhere in Skip Bayless's old-ass head, he's convinced himself that so-called white people truly want America to change for the benefit of the so-called Negro and for their detriment. And I have no idea why. The reality of the situation is that if you're truly that concerned about empowering those who you enslaved, you would give up your belongings, you give up your domicile. You say, you know what we did was wrong. We're going to give you back your land. We're going to give you back your money. We're going to give you back your treasures. We're going to give you back your history. And we're just going to go back to where we came from. That's the only way to provide true restitution. These little talking points on television and these hijinks, these antics, this is really just an attempt to appease so-called black people through nonsense and balderdash
that relate to Black Lives Matter. The white community needs to be reminded again and again and again that Black lives matter and matter and matter and matter.
Well, the so-called white community is just going to say, well, if Black lives matter, do they matter to black people? And despite what liberal blacks say, that is a valid counter-argument. Do so-called Black lives matter to you? Because they have to matter to you before they matter to anyone else. This entire racial narrative and back and forth is what I call a circular argument, meaning it's a conversation that's going nowhere. Because both sides are stuck to their guns. Both sides are not willing to see the perspective of the other. And nor would you expect either side to, because both sides are relatively two-dimensional. Even the so-called white man, though he has a ruling class mentality, is white trash. Because elite-level Caucasians are not even going to converse with so-called black people about changing society. That's not going to happen at all. Like, they wouldn't even fathom some shit like that. It's only white trash that want to go back and forth with black people about race all day.
Because this conversation needs to be kept ablaze. Not just be kept going, but kept afire. Because this country has been on fire with a whole new racial sensitivity over the last couple of months. And I looked forward especially to seeing what LeBron chose to wear on as his message on his back. And
the reason why LeBron chose his last name is because that's who he's concerned with. That's who his God is himself. That's his agenda, is himself.
He took that out of his hands because the NBA decided to issue an approved list that I still cannot fathom.
Well, you cannot fathom it because for some strange reason you think that the NBA is not supposed to be concerned about revenue. They're only supposed to be concerned about putting forth these pseudo-progressive social justice messages. And Adam Silver is letting you know. It's almost like a business partner who, they're normally joking around with you, but now they've read some of the revenue streams and the income, and it's depreciating greatly, and they're letting you know, look, we have to get serious here. Because if we don't focus on the game, there's a potential or possibility that the entire league could capsize.
Of personalized individual expression of freedom, that they would say, no, you have to pick one of these. And I do not blame LeBron, especially for saying, I have to pick one of these.
Well, Skip, I guess in basketball they said in certain contexts, freedom have limits.
In every context, freedom has limits, Shannon Sharp. Can you show up to that show butt naked? Can you show up to film Undisputed with Skip Bayless in just a tank top and a pair of drawers? Or are there conventions? How come you guys are never on your show protesting? Why haven't you showed up to film an episode of Undisputed with a Black Lives Matter t-shirt on? Every day you're suited and booted. Why is that? Why do these liberals on TV always advocate for the so-called regular black man or black male athletes to do things that they themselves will not do? The next time that you see footage of Shannon Sharpe at a protest, at a march, or at a rally will be the first fucking time.
We're going to limit this to 15 phrases or slogans.
And we talked about all the potential motivation for that. But the point was, LeBron said publicly, they did not ask for my input.
Right.
And he just said, okay, I'll go with my name on my back. He was basically saying, I'll go with nothing on my back. But of all people, of all champions for racial justice versus racial injustice, that man I wanted to hear, because he's clever, he's creative. He would have come up with a slogan or an expression.
LeBron James is not clever, he's not creative, and he's never come up with a damn thing a day in his life. Everything that he's done, he stole from somebody else. That more than an athlete thing, he stole from John Wall. The I Can't Breathe t-shirt, he stole from Derrick Rose. The I Promise school out there in Akron, Ohio, was not even his idea. That was from Nike Incorporated. They threw his name on there to promote him as some type of Muhammad Ali, modern day revolutionary figure. LeBron James is literally all smoke and mirrors.
A message that would have resonated. You know, and I know he would have.
Right.
Again, he doesn't need to pick one from a prove list, because that's too run of the mill for him. He's not run of the mill.
Right.
No, actually, he's the definition of run of the mill.
I think the thing is, for me, Skip, and you look at guys like Dwight Howard says, I'm going to donate my entire salary to worthy causes. Patty Mills says, I'm donating my entire salary to worthy causes.
Well, where's LeBron James donating his entire salary to? Because he's getting paid more than any of those guys. And he's also getting multitudes of money off the course, so he would have that money to spare more than any of those guys. Where's he donating his salary to? And don't tell me, well, maybe he's doing it and he's keeping it confidential. LeBron James does not keep anything confidential. If he gives $2 to a homeless man on the street, he wants you to know about it.
And then I get it. Like I said, I love that the NBA did it, but you know, changing and putting a slogan or a phrase on your back, that's a symbolic message. What Dwight Howard's doing is going to have direct effect, impact of what Patty Mills is doing. So I'm more in line with those guys and people.
And Shannon Sharpe, how much money are you donating, bro? You love getting on TV and talking about what everybody else is doing. What the fuck are you doing?
Actually do things. These symbolic gestures are nice, but that's what they are.
I got that. But from my perspective, these messages across the backs of jerseys are not as important to the black community as they are to the white community, as constant reminders, thought-provoke. That's interesting. That's interesting. Keep the thought going in the white minds that are suddenly more open than ever.
In other words, so-called black man, I've thought of a different way for you to tap dance for our attention. Instead of wearing hard-bottom shoes, wear slogans on the back of your jersey so that as I watch you dribble and entertain me, maybe I'll possibly think about being concerned about your life and your welfare. Do you think that that's realistic, Skip Bayless? For me, the answer is no.
That's going to be worth, I don't know, long term. But short term,
it's not going to be worth shit.
Minds are open. Bombard us with your messages. Again, it's fine to have Black Lives Matter written across the court, but I need messages. And now
the NBA is going to experience its lowest ratings in the last 20 years. I promise you that.
Anthony Davis said, well, I'll just go with my family name because it's important to me. Well, that's...
Early on, of course, they're going to be some relatively good ratings because they've been gone for so long. But depending on how obnoxious and how overt a lot of the social justice shit is, they're probably going to have their lowest ratings in the last 20 years. People are just tired of the woke shit.
Resonate with the white people. That's just in one eye and out the other. It will not resonate with white people that Kyle Korver wears Black Lives Matter across his... Nobody cares.
Well, I mean,
So, Skip Bayless, you truly believe that white people are more concerned with black men wearing social justice slogans on their back than a Kyle Korver? I don't think that they're going to be concerned either way. But Kyle Korver, they'll just look at as a cuck and an idiot and someone who's desperate to keep his job in the league. People like Kyle Korver, JJ Redick, they know that they have to let their Negro compatriots understand that, look, I'm fully down with you. Don't even think that I'm not, because I need my job.
His name was Corbin. His name Kyle Black Lives Matter.
Okay, but again, what resonates is when you get it from the black stars. Jimmy Butler is a star in this league, and he's deep. He's a deep thinker. Where
is he? Have you had a conversation with Jimmy Butler to know that, Skip Bayless? Or are you just saying that because he's a black man who can speak about something other than basketball, even if it's not particularly well?
I want to see what you have.
Right.
But he's like LeBron. You're going to make me pick one of these? I don't love any of these. They probably come off as kind of cliched,
right? Yeah,
and just sort of blah.
Right.
Once again, Skip Bayless, they're running a business. It's the job of a business to be relatively cliche. The more quote-unquote cutting edge you are, the more quote-unquote confrontational you are, the more quote-unquote disrespectful you are, the more you're going to separate people, the less your sales. Once again, Michael Jordan hit it right on the head 30 years ago. Republicans buy sneakers too. They're already going to lose enough viewership just with the associations with quote-unquote Black Lives Matter. Please keep in mind that the vast majority of attendees to NBA games are Caucasian. Bottom line. So that's why I've already stated that in my mind, the Major League Baseball owners, the NFL owners, and the NBA owners have mutually agreed with one another that we're going to allow these athletes to get their little social justice warrior thing on. And when the ratings drop and the revenue drops, that will be our way to substantiate a renegotiation of the collective bargaining agreements where we could finally defund these professional sports leagues, which should be defunded. The media should be defunded, and these professional sports leagues should be defunded. Because I think that what these last few months have shown is really how non-essential sports is.
You don't really say enough the way Jimmy would want to say what he says. So he says, well, I'll make a statement. I'm just me. I'm just like all the rest of us who are oppressed.
Yes.
Okay, that's fine for him. Maybe that resonates with you.
Right.
I don't think it resonates with the wider white community.
Right.
And in the end, I don't want this to
I wish you just sat on it. I wish you didn't say anything because you have to see what my message is.
Okay.
So when he comes out there with just 22.
Right, but what his message should be is, I'm going to ball out for the Miami Heat, and what I do off the court is none of your business. How I feel about what's going on is none of your fucking business. I'm going to do what I want to assist my people. Don't worry about it. Mind your fucking business. Because at the end of the day, as usual with super liberals, they're okay with you having freedom of expression, quote unquote, as long as you're expressing yourself how they want you to express yourself, according to the direction that they want you to express yourself in. If one of these so-called black athletes came out and said, I'm against abortion, what if they put that on the back of their jersey? God created Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. What would Skip Bayless and Shannon Sharp say on this show? Well, wait a minute. No, you can't express that. That's why I say the problem with this show is that there's not someone there to push what either one of these fools are saying on a daily basis. And when there's no one there to push you, you just start going further and further over the edge. And this show has descended into just constant, toxic, super liberal banter.
Jimmy, you don't have a message. Well, I mean,
you didn't even have your name.
You're right. You don't have a name on the back. So
okay, that works.
Yeah. So okay. I wish you just sat on it, Skip, just sprung it on people. You know, sometimes you're like, like you see an actor, they growing a look out, and all of a sudden you see him like, oh, what? Must be for a new role or something. I wish Jimmy had done it like that.
I just don't want some white people to think, well, if LeBron doesn't care and Jimmy doesn't care, maybe I shouldn't really care.
No, they care. Oh, LeBron.
Well, obviously.
Oh, yeah, LeBron, nothing. That nigga is the biggest phony, the biggest charlatan, the biggest actor in the entire NBA. No one who understands LeBron was shocked that he decided to not wear a quote-unquote social justice message on the back of his uniform. I promise you, they could have expanded the slogans even further out. LeBron would have wanted something special just for him. King James is more than an athlete, something like that. It wouldn't have had anything to do with Breonna Taylor or Ahmaud Arbery or George Floyd or any of those people. It would have had to revolve around LeBron James, as it always does.
But it's all subliminal message. You're watching 2 hours of basketball, and constantly you're seeing whatever the expression.
Well, I've heard a lot of companies say they care and they're going to do all these things, but I don't see them spending with black companies. So you telling me you care and not showing me that you don't care.
Well, the real issue, Shannon Sharp, is are so-called black people going to spend with black companies? Because that's who's supposed to be spending with so-called black companies, not these major corporations. We have more than enough spending power to make quote-unquote black businesses as affluent as we want them to be. So that's what we have to focus on. But Shannon Sharp's brain is not on that level because he's too busy being a globalist and worried about white people and what white people think and how they feel.
Better than I hear, Skip.
Yep.
I heard what you said.
You're taking it to the next level.
Yeah.
I'm still at...
He's not taking it to any level. He's just a loudmouth old fool. That's what Shannon Sharp is. Nothing against the brother. And I've always said, you know, he has good intellect for a liberal black. For a liberal black. But liberal Negroes are so mentally disturbed. It's so sad to listen to them speak. Because you can tell they're only trying to act as if they're speaking strong. They can't see a society without white people.
Breakthrough level, right?
Yeah.
Now, okay.
I see Nike and Adidas and Michael Jordan said they're going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars in the community.
Yeah.
Okay, well, how many hundreds of thousands of dollars have you spent in the so-called black community, Shannon Sharp? Where have you put your money, bro?
One thing, I want to see what Apple, I want to hear what Google, I want to hear what Microsoft and Facebook and all these companies, they say, oh yeah, Black Lives Matter. Well, enough of that. We don't want any more billboards. We don't want you to paint any more street. Damn a street.
When these companies say Black Lives Matter, they're talking about Marxism. That's what they're referencing. We're ready to go wholly Marxist, wholly communist, so that we can make even more money and trick these regular sheep into believing that we're on their side.
Put some money in black banks. Put some money in black community.
Shannon Sharp, so-called black people can put money in black banks. That's what we can do. We don't need their money, man. So-called black people have spending power in the multiple billions.
That's what we want.
Okay, I got you. That's your point of view. I'm still taking the baby steps of awareness, conversation, more openness to this, and I feel like
Skip, you crawling. I'm taking baby steps. That's number steps I'm taking.
Right.
When I start talking about walking, then we really gonna have a
I
conversation.
still feel like it.
We're never gonna have no damn conversation, Shannon Sharp, because none of these people take your dumb ass seriously. Right? Again, I call it dumb just because, you know, it has no end game to it, and it's entirely emotionally driven. The brother has the ability to recall events that transpired 20 to 25 years ago, down to the moment, down to the particulars, but he can't figure out what power dynamics are, and that people do things to accrue power, and that when they lose power, they want it back. That's why there's no such thing as equality, and there never will be. Skip Bayless has you on his show for a reason. Yes, you being so-called black has something to do with it, but it's because it's to his benefit to have a so-called black man there. Just that Hegelian image of black versus white is going to make the show more appealing. Skip figured that out a long time ago with Stephen A. Smith.
Or dropped the ball on this. It started with him and the approved list.
Right.
That's.
The approval changes things when you only can pick and choose what
Right.
you want to represent. It isn't.
Yes, just like at Fox, they give you guys a wardrobe, and they say this is what you can pick and choose to wear. Right, Jenny Taft? Can you come onto the show with the clothes that you wear in your own closet? I doubt it. All these shows, they have a wardrobe because they're saying this is what's presentable for on air. You can bring some of your own clothes, but of course they're going to have to be subject to review. Right? But anyway,